We begin on time. Is that the rule in Jerusalem? I'm happy to do that. My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Tom.
And I'm a member of the Al-Anon community, so I'm a bilingual person. And I'm happy to be here. I'm from Oakland, California. I had the opportunity to be here. I was in Dubai for the last week. I gave a conference to people there talking about steps and traditions, and glad to be here on the way home. So I've known Tim for off and on for 10 years, 15 years. He's gotten much worse in the last few years. I want you to know this. So you want to be supportive and kind and encouraging because he has issues. I thought I'd talk a little bit about me for a few moments so you can get me, on your graph. And then this evening, we want to talk about some practical stuff on the steps, how practical they are, how flexible they are. So I'm from the United States. I live in California. If America is free, California is more free, and that's how I've lived my life. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm an alcoholic. There's alcoholism in my family. I'm the first one to get sober. Not the last, but the first one to get sober. I'm a high school teacher. I'm in the Jesuit community. Jesuits and Jews have a long connection, frequently friendly, which is good news. I taught kids. I found alcohol to be a very useful tool to deal with stress and strain and discomfort and emotions. And I drank when I was a kid, a high school kid myself, and in my 20s. And I experienced a lot of fun around alcohol, and I experienced a lot of trouble around alcohol, and I could not stop drinking. I was intervened on and put in treatment by a new boss, and I have been an active member of the AA community since August of 1976. So that's a long time. I'm also in my 76th year, so I know much more than him. And if you have any questions, ask me. You try to be supportive of young people. And I started going to Al-Anon when I was around 10 years sober. I've got craziness around helping people and obsessing about people and then wanting to hurt them because they don't cooperate. And so I come into Al-Anon with 10 years of sobriety, but I was exhausted and I was enraged. And those are still issues for me. I got sober in Berkeley, California. That's where I went to school. We had one sober rabbi in Berkeley. I want you to know his name was David. Of course, his name was David. And his brother, whose name was Moshe, is a stand-up comedian who's also a sober person. So it's this traditional Jewish family, rabbi, comedian. And my first therapist, when I was brand new sober, was Leonard Schwartzberg, who was an observant Jewish fellow. And he and I spent a lot of time together. So, as someone said, I don't have a goyish Kopf, which I'm grateful for. That's I don't think like a Gentile, in case you're wondering. But the Al-Anon stuff, my Al-Anon stuff had to do, as a teacher, as a helper, as a supporter, I would just get involved in things that were none of my business, and then wonder why I was angry and why everybody else was angry. And it took me a long time to sort things out. And today and tomorrow and Wednesday, I'm happy to share with you some of my own process for sorting things out and for staying in recovery. There's an occasional movie on people who are addicts and alcoholics and who need 100,000 Al-Anon meetings. And the person's in treatment, and when the person leaves treatment, the person says, "I've got this." And that's pretty much a death sentence. No one has this. It's cunning and baffling and powerful. And I get a daily reprieve from the worst of my crazy, and I do this a day at a time. I don't know how else to do this, but a day at a time. I was ordained a priest in 1978, and I'm active. I help out in the parish. I do different things. I'm an active member of the community, and I could not do that without Al-Anon, because it reminds me to stay out of other people's messes, and there's a lot of messes. Last point, I guess. This is in the last 6 months. So I'm an older person. I'm experiencing older person things. Gravity scares me. My sponsor of many years died last December. So there's some change going on in my life. And it was a calm day, nothing in particular that stood out. But I suddenly had this fantasy, this idea of buying a bottle of bourbon, going to an AA meeting, drinking it in the parking lot, having a gun with me, going into the meeting and shooting myself. That was about a 4-minute fantasy. And when I got to the point where I was shooting myself, this is the perfect program that I have, I was able to pause and say, I think something's going on. I'm angry about something. I don't know what I'm angry about. I'm going to have to do some writing and some paying attention, but something's going on. And one of the things I was told for my own recovery is don't keep secrets. So let a couple people know this right away. And I might have to pay attention to an inventory, and I might have to pay attention to the hungry and the angry and the lonely and the tired. It's a very practical program. And of course, ask God for help. God, help me sort this out. As the Brits would say, it's a very nice phrase you have, to sort things out. And I'm here today, and I'm glad to be here. So that's a bit of me. I'm the youngest of 3 sons. My father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. His father was an alcoholic. So we come here honestly. Doctor?
So my name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also, as I've been trained to say, a grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of Al-Anon. I'm an Al-Anon. I'm also eligible for the S fellowships, which, if you don't know, is our code for sex. Okay, but we're going to say S now. But it triggers everyone otherwise if you say the full word. Those problems, FYI, for me, I've sorted out with AA and Al-Anon. Other people go, and I do one S meeting a week. So I've got my fingers in lots of different pies. Where it started was the Anonism, the Al-Anonism. So there aren't many alcoholics, very visibly so in my family. My brother was an alcoholic who committed suicide. 5 of my 8 great-grandparents were alcoholics. So it's in the blood, but my grandparents weren't, and my parents weren't. There are various people in my family who are addicts, but it's all very hush-hush. Some alcoholics, some people have food problems, but everyone has been mentally ill in a very extreme way. Almost everyone has been institutionalized, often for months, sometimes for years. Lots of people drugged for their entire lives once the problems manifested. So I didn't come from a happy family. And the messages I was given were not covert, they weren't hidden. I was literally told at the age of 10, if you do well at school, it will take your mother's pain away. Now, I didn't have to dig for this message. It was just there. My idea growing up was, if you are perfect, then they can't get you. And no one ever specified who they were, but they were there, they were real, and they were picking people off one by one. And if I made a mistake, I would be next. You need to make yourself secure at all costs. And then I discovered romance at the age of 14, and that developed into other things. The alcohol started at the age of 15, 16, really took off. I lived in Germany when I was 17, where you can drink legally. And so I drank legally every day. Got back to the UK when I was 18, and I don't know how, I wish I was going to translate this into Hebrew, but an old soak I was like an old alcoholic at the age of 18. One of my favourite drinks was a drink called blue curacao, and my tongue was often blue during the day as a result. I didn't really care that people knew that I was drinking. The reason I came into AA when I was 21, I think looking back, was chiefly because I ran out of money and I didn't know where the alcohol was going to come from. I literally didn't know where it was going to come from. There was no one in my life to get money from. The bank had taken my card, the bank had taken my checkbook. There was no more money. And I didn't know that AA existed, not consciously, but the thought occurred to me to look up alcohol in a phone book, and I did, and there was the number Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't stop drinking permanently for 6 months. One feature of my addiction, and indeed my anonism, is that I can have a rock bottom very, very easily. So small things push me to the notion of suicide within 0 to 60 in 10 seconds. Small difficulty, why bother? Life is not value for money, there's no point in being here. But okay, so, and I rock bottom very, very quickly, but I bounce back very, very quickly. So within a week of being in AA, I was looking round and thinking, everyone looks so grey and dull, and who are they even? My ego had grown back within a week, and I was sitting at the back giggling with people because what else are you going to do in AA but mock? And I kept drinking periodically until I was really beaten, and I said to AA in general, whatever you want me to do, I will do it as long as I have the dignity of never having another drink. And funnily enough, that was the worst thing, is how undignified it was to be arrested at 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon for being drunk and disorderly and having caused a traffic accident. Simply by throwing myself in front of a car. You see, the aim is to die but not have it your fault, so you've got to construct the accident so no one can... So you're out of the game, but no one can blame you because it was tragic. So that was the game that I would play, and I wanted the dignity of never playing that game again. as I was saying to someone in the car on the way over here, I discovered Al-Anon after about a year and a bit of AA, maybe a year and a half of AA. Then I really discovered it at around 10 years sober. Then I really, really discovered it at around 16. And then I really, 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 really discovered it at around 25, 26 years sober. Exhaustion and rage are the two rooms in the house, and I would just float back and forth between the two. I think the rage gets so exhausting, you can't do anything but be tired, and as soon as the energy comes back, you're off again, up in everyone's business, because one's own is too empty. There's nothing there, nothing. So you have to find something wrong with someone else and fix it. So are we qualified to be here? Do you think?
I think there's evidence that you should be here. I'm just here visiting, you know. But I again identify with all sorts of things. In over 40 years of participating in the recovery program, I've had up and down and up and down and up and down. In my earliest months and even first couple of years, I was having extremely intense emotions. None of them I had any words for, because I don't want to have emotions. I want to think about emotions. I really like living in my head. It's such a entertaining place. And I was going way up and way down and way up and way down, and I was going to meetings, and there were many, many happy people. They were so glad to be there, and they loved the and I was feeling crazy because I was feeling. That's one of the reasons I started seeing Leonard the therapist, because I didn't have words for any of this. I want to be shut down. I want to be depressed. I want to be disconnected. Alcohol is a great depressant. I also loved marijuana. It's such a sweet drug. And I would stay asleep for as long as I can. But if I'm no longer taking depressants, I start waking up. And I did not wake up polite. I woke up angry and afraid. Not pleasant. So I remember going to see Leonard. And he was about 9 years older than me, which is very nice. He had a wife and a couple of kids, and he was an older, safe person to talk to. And I was going to meetings, of course, but Leonard helped me find words for things. And I asked him once if he thought I was normal, because I didn't feel normal. I didn't know what I felt. It was all these scary words. In treatment, they said, people feel happy, people feel sad, people feel mad. There might be one more, I don't know. But, basic words, and all of them were new to me. And I asked Leonard if he thought I was normal, and he said, normal is a temperature. Yeah. And I said, what am I trying? What? I didn't even have a question. He said, you're trying to ask if you're healthy, if you're okay. How do you know? Because you've been very ill for a long time. And he said, healthy people can do three kinds of things. Healthy people can work, healthy people can love, and healthy people can play. If you know someone who can work and love and play, you know someone who has a life. And I needed him to explain these words further because I was so far removed from them. As a teacher, I was unreliable. Most of the time I was there. Isn't that enough? No, they want you always to be there. It's really very oppressive. Being able to stick with a job, being able to stick with the project, even when I got bored, finishing projects. This was my first 10 years of recovery, is learning how to do that. Learning how to work. A lot of us come into recovery too, and we change careers. Because what we could do in illness, we can't do in recovery. It no longer works. I had a friend in San Francisco. He volunteered, my guy my age. He's a little short, so he's conscious that he's a little short, and he has to prove that he's a guy. So he volunteered for 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. Volunteered. And then he came back, and he joined the San Francisco Police Department, and he worked on the bomb squad for 10 years. Now this is high excitement. And he gets sober during that time. And when he's about 5 years sober, year 5 in the bomb squad, his sponsor suggested a career change. No one thinks you're a sissy. Come on. Let's have a more ordinary job. There's lots of those stories. And the love stuff, this is family and friends. My sponsor would talk about, if you're an addict, if you're an alcoholic, if you're an obsessive compulsive person, you're pretty isolated at the end of your run. Whether it's a lot of vodka or a lot of food or 16 hours of internet pornography, at the end of your run, you've made no new friends. So you have to learn how to reach out and make connections with people. This is the loving part. So my sponsor would talk about finding friends, companions, and allies. One of the reasons to go to meetings was to just meet other people, because we've been so isolated. And I was better than you or worse than you, but I wasn't like you. And it took a while to identify with the people in the rooms. When I started doing that, my life became better. And learning how to play, learning how to enjoy, learning how to take delight in being alive. Boy, that's good stuff. And I was glad early in my recovery I got those words, working and loving and playing. And that's how I understand that second step where it talks about being restored to sanity. It's not just that I'm dry, but I'm becoming a human being again.
A couple of things I thought of then. One I've been thinking about for a while, which is, I thought having a good program meant I wouldn't feel anything. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, I think I have a lot more feelings now than I did even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. For many years, I was pushed around by my feelings. So if I had a feeling, it was like I was inside it, and it was the whole universe, and I was just trapped in it, and it was forcing me to act in certain ways. Now it feels more like a feeling is something that I can have without it hurting, without the feeling hurting me, even though the feeling is painful. It's a very curious thing. I'll give you a practical example. A very good friend of mine who's been in recovery for decades, we used to talk for an hour every evening around 11 o'clock, just talking through the day. And he is not currently a member of AA anymore, and he's finding other ways to change how he feels. And my other half and I love him very much. So we haven't said, well, he's drinking, that's the end of that. We're still close to him. And he was in London recently, and he was not in a good way. He thought he was doing all right, No one else thinks he's doing all right. And of course, I felt something. I felt pain on his behalf. I felt pain on my own behalf. But it's rather like being an ocean where there's a storm happening on the surface. The storm doesn't harm the ocean. It's simply something the ocean is. And the ocean goes a very long way down and the storm is just there. So I can experience these things. But it's just like when I was much younger, I used to go to these film festivals, or you know when a cinema will put on all of the Ingmar Bergman films in a row over a very, very long weekend, or Emir Kusturica, or just one of those incredibly depressing filmmakers. And I could feel something through those films or through theatre, but it was too much in my life. So I had to drink or do other things not to feel it. And now I can feel things in my life without those things controlling me, without the pain becoming suffering. And it's funny, it's not quite like watching a film because it's really happening. But I'm not unseated by it usually. I am sometimes. But I know what to do about that. I have a remedy for when I get unseated or unsettled. So this is what recovery has done for me. It's done that. It's restored emotion, I think, to its rightful place. So that on a good day, and that's a condition, on a good day, my feelings are timely and appropriate and proportionate. So I feel them when the thing happens, and they're appropriate to the situation and they're right size. And when I do that, the feeling just goes out the other side. It's like the front door is open and the back door is open. For years, the front door was open, but the back door wasn't. And so the feelings just got stored up. Like these huge warehouses of unfelt emotion. The other thing is about jobs and career and so on, and certain things not being compatible. In London, I come from London. In London, AA for a while, and don't tell any of them I've said this. So let's hope they won't listen to the tape. People would say, oh, "I love recovery. It's marvelous. I've got a very big life. I've got a big life. I've got a career and I've got a marriage, and I didn't have any of those things. And I've got a car and a house and a this." And it makes me tired, the thought of having a big life. My aim is to have a small life now, and I have a small life, and I'm very happy with it. And I've decided, many years ago, my other half said to me, I used the word career, my career, and he said, "You don't have a career." And my first thought was, that's very rude. It's very uncalled for to say that, but he was right. Because I don't treat what I do during the day like a career. It is an occupation. I occupy myself for a certain number of hours a day doing things. And when I do the things, they give me money for the things. Which means it's also a livelihood. It's an occupation and a livelihood. But it's not a career, because, don't tell any of my clients this, I don't care. I really don't. And I felt very guilty for a long time that I have this visceral gut reaction against certain agencies, against working with them. There are some I'm drawn towards, there are some I feel allergic to. And for years, I overrode that feeling and would work with first come, first served. If you ask me, I'll say yes. And I thought this was very fair. And I ended up working for agencies that were complicated and temperamental and attacky, and who did not defend their contractors against unfair criticism from clients. They were just horrible to work with. Then I went through a phase of saying no to those agencies, unless I really had nothing else to do, but feeling guilty about it. I should be saying yes. I'm just running away. And you know what, today I say yes to the agencies where my gut, my instinct says these are good people, it's simple, it's straightforward. And I don't feel guilty about saying no to the complicated ones, because life is just too short. There is enough that happens just when life is well managed, when you manage who is in it, there is enough that's happening without letting all the crazy people all the way into the inner circle. And I have to deal with crazy people at a distance, but those are formal relationships. Students can be crazy. Sponsees can have occasional issues. But there's a formality there. The inner circle, I'm very careful who is allowed in there, and that makes for a lot of peace today.
I always thought I'd be a high school teacher, and I taught 3 years drunk and 4 years sober. And it's easier to teach high school children when you're drinking. I just want to be honest, because it's instant. If you're having a bad day, you can take care of it right away. And when I was 5 years sober, it was time to change careers. I no longer liked the kids. I didn't like their music. I didn't like everything. I was arguing. I was in my mid-30s, and I was arguing with kids about everything, and I was the craziest teacher on the faculty. So it's time to leave. And I left there, and I went into social work for a while, and organization for a while, and now I do different things. I get to do a lot of retreats and workshops and gatherings for people in recovery. So I've been doing that full-time since 1984. Claudia Black is a therapist and a person in recovery, and her family was very alcoholic, both parents, and she was the middle child. And when she saw the chaos of her home, she decided at 13 and 14 and 15 years old, this will never happen to me. And of course it did happen to her, because she developed her own alcoholism. She gets into recovery, and an awful lot of the work on family dynamics has been done by women. That's worth noticing. A lot of men leave their families, women stay with their families. And she wrote a book, it's one of the first I read, that dealt with Al-Anon things, and it was called It Will Never Happen to Me. Mm-hmm. And she talked about the crazy family, the crazy system, the crazy part of town. And she said there are 3 rules that get followed if the family is very damaged. The first rule is do not talk. Don't talk. We're not going to talk about the alcoholism or the suicide or the runaway or the mental illness or the depression. My family had all kinds of secrets. Perhaps yours do too. And they concerned people getting suddenly pregnant, out of the blue, suicides, depression. None of that was talked about. Don't talk. Surely don't talk about the alcoholism. Avoid, minimize, distract. And I learned as a survival mechanism, if something's uncomfortable, I just change the subject. I'm very good at that. Don't talk. Rule number 2, don't trust. Because today's confidence becomes tomorrow's ammunition. So you don't trust anybody. I remember I was standing on the roof of the high school I taught in, the 4th floor, big brick building, looking out over Los Angeles late at night, smoking marijuana with some friends. It's very consoling. And one of them said, you know, it's like you have secrets and you don't share them with anybody. You have all this, you don't let anybody in. I didn't know how to let anybody in. You don't share vulnerability. You don't share things like that. And I didn't know what was there either. It's not like I knew something and I'm not telling you. I had no idea what was there. I'm a sedated person. An overworked, exhausted, sedated person. I don't know what's there. So don't trust anyone. And rule number 3 is don't feel. Because if you feel anything, you just feel lousy. And coming into recovery, Tim's mentioned this, I've mentioned this, as the emotional world opens up, it's learning a new language. And it can be very uncomfortable. When I was sober 8 or 10 years, AIDS hit the community, the recovery community, and all of a sudden people who were healthy on Monday are dead on Friday. And it was terrifying. And people were, there was all this grief and loss and sickness, and I had no words for it. I had to, a lot of Al-Anon conversation is about loss and letting go. If you love an addict, if you love an alcoholic, you're going to be disappointed. If you love an addict, if you love an alcoholic, your heart's going to be broken. If you love an addict, if you love an alcoholic, things are not going to go the way you planned. And that whole experience of grief and sadness and anger and joy and intimacy and friendship and sweetness, it's all there. I thought I could turn off the dark feelings, but you just turn off feelings. So, coming into recovery, learning how to talk about things, learning how to trust, and learning how to feel is what happens in the rooms. It's what happens in the contact. That first step, talking about powerlessness and unmanageability. A lot of us have had nightmare stuff with powerlessness and unmanageability. You can talk about it here. And I did not know how to do that, but I learned from others, learning to talk about it. And my sponsor, an elegant man with a nimble mind, died at 84. He said, we learn here how to tell the truth about ourselves without blaming anyone else and without letting ourselves off the hook. We learn to tell our stories without editorial opinion. And then people can identify. I'm a daily drinker, I'm a drunk driver. Lots of depression, lots of anger. I heard my sponsor say, I'm a drunk driver, that means I was willing to kill you. You know? Same me. And that first step, it never feels good. Step 1 isn't, I took the first step and I'm so happy. It's just not, it's the end of the world. Where I live, I don't know anything about lots of local stuff here, but where I live, there's a dozen different groups who are looking forward to the end of the world. And there's prophecies, and we had a guy with a date and a prophecy, and everyone gets excited in the end of the world. Well, if you're in recovery, your world has ended all kinds of times. And I think in human history, the world has come to an end all kinds of times. When the bomb landed on Hiroshima, the world came to an end. San Francisco earthquake and fire in 1906, the world came to an end. Earthquake in Turkey, just ever so, the world came to an end for 40,000 people. And the first step is talking about how our own worlds came to an end. The powerlessness and the unmanageability and the shame. I've never done what you did. I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard. I've never heard anyone admit drinking blue curacao before. I find that I drank creme de menthe, which is a green tongue, not a blue tongue, and that's a more advanced form of recovery. But learning how to experience that first step, and that second step comes right afterwards, which is hope. There's a way out. When the San Francisco earthquake happened in April 1906, it's very big where I live. It's a reference point. My father was 2 years old. What happened soon as the fires were put out was people began rebuilding. Exactly. There was some excitement a few years ago because the Mayan calendar, the Mayans are Central Americans, and they had a calendar, and they calculate, and they're mathematical. A little bit of human sacrifice, but no one's perfect. And they had this very elaborate calendar, and there were people excited. The Mayan calendar is coming to an end! And what happens when the calendar comes to an end is it starts over. Oh no, December 31st! January 1st. In the second step, we start rebuilding. We start experiencing rebuilding. It's about hope, a power greater than ourselves, bringing us back to where we can work and love and play. A power greater than ourselves. And I don't have to know much more about it than change is happening and I'm not in charge. I mean, I hadn't had a drink in 6 months and I didn't do it. I think change recovery is subtle and slow and frequently surprising. Last point, and then to Tim. One of my mentors in Al-Anon was a woman named Blanche. And she was from Texas and a very interesting person. And she said this about powerlessness and guilt. Some of us would rather feel guilty than powerless. Because guilt implies I should have been able to handle this, figure it out, try harder. I should have been, all that stuff. There's something I could have done. But the fact is, there was nothing we could have done. And it's terrifying. The powerlessness. In the Serenity Prayer, we talk about things I cannot change. I cannot change the past. I cannot change the truth. And I cannot change you. Loving someone does not change them. It changes me. And hating someone does not change them. It changes me. And what can I change? My thinking, my behavior, and my attitudes. Learning how to talk about things, learning how to trust. Learning how to feel.
I was talking to a Bedouin in the old city. I didn't start this conversation. I discovered I was in the middle of a conversation. And I didn't resist this. And he said a number of things. One of the things he said was, it's no good complaining about things. You're only hurting yourself. I hadn't been complaining. I hasten to add, this was just offered. And where this comes in is tell the truth, but without editorial comment. When I go through step 4 and step 8 with sponsees, my current process that I do, which is the process I do myself, is very exact and very precise, but only when I'm doing steps 4 and step 8. I don't want to spend my whole life doing analysis of myself. what I do on a daily basis, my daily inventory, is very different. And I've got a little method, which I get from... Do you know Dennis F?
Sure.
Oh, you do? Dennis F says a very simple way to do an inventory. Say, what's the story? One line. That's all you get. One line. And then, where am I wrong? And then, what would God have me be or do instead? And the situation with my friend who is not very well. What's the story? I'm sad because he's unwell. Where am I wrong? I'm wishing for the old friendship back. And I don't want to accept that although he's still my friend, it's different now. And what would God have me do? Extend love and only love in my mind. And then that manifests in the behaviour. And he and I have conversations in, as it were, the real world, or what C.S. Lewis would call the shadow lands, the shadow world. But I have conversations with him in my mind, which is maybe the real place where the conversation is happening. Very simple. What's the story? Tell the truth. Where am I going wrong? Now that needs a bit of inspiration, not analysis. I didn't get the answer to that by thinking about it. I popped it up to the higher power. I said, I'm feeling sad about this. There we go. I don't know what's wrong here. I'm not going to bring an old judgment or an old analysis into this. You show me. And then it came. A day later it came. And then a few minutes later the answer for what I'm to do for certainly the present came, and it felt right. I don't do 2 and 3 by analysis. I do it by prayer, and then something comes. And if it hasn't come, it's not ready to come. You know, in Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon wants Penny's attention, and he says, Penny, Penny, Penny. Praying like that does not help me. God is not hard of hearing. He heard me the first time. He'll answer when he's good and ready. My other half is not hard of hearing. He heard me the first time. He'll answer when he's good and ready. There are questions I posed in 2005 which have not yet been answered, and that's fine. With the addictive process, step 1, I did not, this is a terrible secret, I did not give everything up straight away. Now, the drink and the drugs, that took 6 months for me to say, right, I'm done forever, and forever has to start now, and I'm going to handle it a day at a time, but it has to be forever. If I think I'm going to pick up in 10 years' time, another part of my mind says, well, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it now. And it just gets brought forward. So I had to be comfortable with that. I can't do this safely. And then I handle not doing it a day at a time or a minute at a time. So the romance and the S stuff came and went, and there were flare-ups, just like with inflammatory conditions. There were flare-ups. And I've thrown in the towel fully with both of those delusional systems. What was going on was part of me thought, if I work the program hard enough, I can have a good program over here and have excitement over there, and I can keep the two apart very successfully, very carefully. No one need know. London is a big place. And isn't it normal to ... When I realised, finally, that there is nothing to be had in those areas as addictive patterns. There is, of course, such a thing as romance in the real world, but that has nothing to do with romantic obsession. And there is such a thing as healthy sex as a form of communication, but that has nothing to do with what I was up to. When I realised there was nothing left for me in those worlds, then my step one was done. But whilst there was still power in those areas for me, nothing could have stopped me. Which means the reason they haven't stopped yet is not because we haven't explained it carefully enough. They're not done because they're not done. And all of their excuses, the reason they keep telling the same excuse story, oh, I was never happy sober, and so I had to start doing X, Y, and Z. The reason they're telling the story such a lot is because they don't believe it, which is why they're having to re-establish that non-true truth. But eventually, there's a line in A Course in Miracles where it says, people's capacity for pain is huge, but it's not infinite. And one by one, these other areas, I got to a point I cannot do this anymore. Just show me what to do. And stopping became automatic. And just one thing on hope, and then a break.
Break.
One thing on hope. A few years ago, and I've got to be apolitical here, in a country in a galaxy far, far away, I was at an AA conference, and there was a big political event going on in the country, and everyone was upset or joyous, one or the other. Half of the country was upset, the other half was joyous. Most of the people I knew were very upset, very angry, reading all of the newspapers and scrolling, doom scrolling they call it, doom scrolling. There should be a fellowship for doom scrolling. My sponsor was twitchy. My sponsor's sponsor was twitchy. My sponsor's sponsor's wife was twitchy. And I thought, oh, how am I going to see my way through this? And I had breakfast with Kurt. Do you know Kurt Z? Kurt Z? I had breakfast with Kurt, and Kurt had been sober for 20 years, relapsed for 2, was back a bunch of years again, and we had breakfast, and I asked him how he was, and I asked him if he was aware really of what was going on politically and how he felt about it, whether he was worried by it. And during the course of the conversation, he spoke for about an hour. I didn't manage to get anything in there. He just spoke and I let him. And he's got these very piercing blue eyes. And we were looking at each other throughout this conversation. And when he said, I'm fine, there's stuff going on, but I'm fine, I believed it because I looked in his eyes and saw that he was okay. And as soon as there was one person that was okay, I thought I can be okay too. His way of being okay may be different than mine. But that's step 2, when I realised there is a way of navigating this situation and being at peace, even though I have feelings, but I can be at peace. Those are 2 different questions for me. As soon as I realise there is a solution and I see it physically in someone, then I'm all right. Then it's just a matter of finding the path through the maze. But that's where step 2 clicks for me. Should we stop there?
We should take a 15-minute break to do whatever you need to do. I brought with me, this of course is the white flag of surrender, but I also brought with me little bumper stickers that say, oh, lighten up. And that's for those of us who are overly serious. And if you need one of these, you're welcome to take it today. They're free. And if you take one of these and give it to someone else, it's an Al-Anon slip. And if you'd like one for yourself, you're most welcome to have one.
Oh, and one thing about the flag, it actually used to be an Israeli flag, but we put it in the washing machine and all the blue came out. So that's what we've got now.
15 minutes. 15 minutos.